Hey, I just finished this interview with John Henry. It was my first time ever interviewing somebody that's been on television. So, needless to say, I was a little nervous, but I was really excited to do it, really honored to do it. Make sure you check out the timestamps below to skip ahead to certain questions. If you're here for the first time, so glad you're here. Consider clicking the like button, click that share button, click that subscribe button, and thanks for joining us. All right, guys, well, welcome to episode 39 of Millennials in Ministry. I'm your host, Erin V. Lashley, and today I have John Henry on the show. I'm super excited about it. He's an entrepreneur, partner at Harlem Capital. He's the host of Hustle on Viceland. He sold his first company at 21, and he was on Forbes 30 Under 30. John, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
When you say all that, it makes me makes me just be like, damn.
Yeah, I've done some stuff. Just to give you like a little bit of context for those just joining on, I first was introduced to John. My brother randomly out of the blue texted me and was like, hey, you got to check out this show. He sent me a link to the first episode of Hustle on YouTube. I watched it, fell in love with it, binge watched all the episodes that I could at the time, and then I went over to YouTube and I've gone through almost all your YouTube content.
Oh,
I
that's
really,
great.
really like what you're putting out, and it's really inspiring. But for those who are coming on and maybe don't know anything about you, can you just give us a little bit of context as to your upbringing and what you're doing today?
Yeah. Thanks for watching, by the way. It means a lot.
Yeah.
I'm just a scrappy son of immigrants that wanted to do a lot with a little.
Yeah.
And that'll always be like the bottom line for me. So
That's
whether
cool.
it's, I just find it a crime to be passive,
Mhm.
or at least like my mom has developed a nuanced understanding for me. She tells me, John, in order for the world to be around, you need every type of person. So I'll take a step back on that. And I'll say that for me personally, like,
Yeah.
I just want to be the opposite of passive. I want to always see what I could build.
Mhm.
So that's turned into businesses, that's turned into media, that's turned into real estate. Mostly my lane and angle has always been like businessman.
Yeah. That's really
Yeah.
good. And I would love for you to just talk a little bit about, you said something in one of the videos that I watched about one of the regrets you have when you exited and sold your first company, is that you wish you wouldn't have splurged as much right off the bat, but you wish you would have let your money work for you. And I want to know from you, like, what happened that caused that shift in mindset for you? Like, who did you encounter? Did something happen? Did you read something where you were no longer like, dang, I got money, let me do what I couldn't do before, to dang, I got money, let it work for me and make more money, you know?
Yeah. I think it was less of like a financial literacy intelligence thing. It was more like my mom asked me, she was like, yo, what do you have to show for all that you've, been able to do? And I was like, nothing actually.
Mm.
And like I had to just reflect on that. And I never wanted it if my mom asked me that the answer would be nothing. And so
Yeah,
like that's when I realized like, money comes and goes. Like it ebbs and flows rather. It ebbs and
yeah,
flows. And so for me, my strategy, I'm not like, I'm a pretty simple guy. I left school. Like, so I think in like little bite-sized nuggets, and the
hmm,
strategy from that point became, if I'm going to go broke all the time, or
yeah,
rather, if you're going to go broke, whether you do something with the cash or not, I realized like, okay, I want to go broke because I'm buying stuff. Like I'm going
yeah,
to work really hard to accumulate. And when you accumulate, buy something,
hmm,
invest in something. It could be investing in your content. It could be investing in yourself. It could
yeah,
be, but be active with what you're able to accumulate. And so that's kind of like how I think about it, if that makes sense.
yeah. Yeah, from there, like you said something else that really stuck out to me in one of your videos. You said when people don't own land, they settle for brand. And
Yeah.
I want you, can you explain that a little bit and why that's true?
Yeah. I just think it just speaks to if you don't, in our communities, like if you don't, we are disproportionately affected with, not owning, a lot of pretty much
Yeah,
anything. And so
yeah,
as a result, you want something that looks like, you know what I'm saying? Like that
Right,
has
right.
that same perceived status. So it's easier to throw on a watch or fresh kicks, or, you know, you throw on the, you know what I'm saying? You throw on the
Yeah.
brands, and then all of a sudden
Mhm.
you're looking like you got it.
Hmm.
Um, you know, it's because it's a lot easier to look like you have it than to have it. And so, you
Yeah.
know, it didn't come to me until much later, this whole mindset and understanding of like, yo, let's build for the long term here. You know,
Yeah.
this is not
Yeah.
an instant gratification thing. Like, let's lay down the groundwork and
Hmm.
understand that we're gonna leave all that stuff on the shelf for right now.
Hmm.
And,
Yeah.
and we're willing to go through the discomfort of laying down the foundation for something that's going to have lasting change.
Yeah.
And, you know, it takes individuals in any community to be willing to bear that cross in order for
Mhm.
any group to have progress. And like,
Sure.
I'm just comfortable being in that seat.
Yeah. So if someone's like been following you, like for myself, you know, I've been following you, like everything you say resonates with me because I feel like when I discovered you, it was almost like seeing Black Panther for the first time because you're like, wow, like I did like where has John Henry been all my life? Like I didn't know that there's people that look similar to me that are
Thank you.
just as young as me that are crushing it, that are they actually exist, you know, like people like you I don't see a lot. And so it really inspired me to encounter you. But for those of us who are hearing what you're saying, consuming your content and are like resonating with everything, but just want to get there, want to get to the place of I own and I don't just, you know, even just building a personal brand, starting there, that's kind of where I'm starting. But how do you, like, what's the first step if you want to learn to own one day, you know?
Yeah. So I'll start by saying that, again, my mom instilled this idea that like it takes every kind of person for the world to go around. So, you
Yeah.
know, when I first discovered like the power of like owning, or like even just making a living doing what you love, like producing something that you
Mhm.
love, like that to me was like a groundbreaking kind of moment for me as well, that I learned from being a doorman. I think exposure, like I didn't have mentors growing up, but exposure and proximity while I was a doorman exposed me to like tons of people making a living with the labor of love. Like there was a
Yeah.
professional dating coach, a professional rock climber, you know, like that was a really big moment for me when I realized, wow, you can make a living, and a really good one, doing exactly what you love. And
Yeah.
then the next kind of thing for me was like, oh, okay, you could make a living doing what you love and still never get to that point where you have true freedom unless you get to, boom, the level where you're thinking about ownership. So it's been all in kind of levels for me. And
Hmm.
so I wouldn't try to like accelerate someone's, you know, growth, kind of progress or journey to mirror mine,
Yeah.
because everyone's just a little bit different. So I'm not
Hmm.
sure, you know, who's watching right now, but first is like discovering this world where you can make a living doing what you love. That is
Yeah.
groundbreaking. And then after that, you start getting to this point where, um, you know, if you do start thinking about ownership, and that is something that you are interested in, man, the first step is understanding that it's like I used to get tripped up and get hung up on the amount, like, oh, $1 million or whatever. But it's when we started treating, me and my partners at Harlem Capital, we started putting
Yeah.
together just like a few checks to invest in small businesses. And we
Hmm.
always treated 15K like if it was 15 million,
Hmm.
you know? And it wasn't about like, oh man, we got to work to get to that point. It was like, no, how can we, you know, act like in such a way that would honor getting to that stage? And it starts by
Yeah.
treating the seed level with that kind of respect. And that's where I want to take it. Like people neglect the progress of a baby step because they're
Hmm.
so caught up on like the big move that they
Sure.
don't see that it consists of like lots of little small moves.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I think. So with respect to ownership, if you know want to get tactical for a moment, like yeah, there's plenty of information out there. You can start with that. With
Yeah.
specifically with real estate, I used to go and like walk properties and pretend like I had the money to buy, having absolutely
Really.
no money, just so that the broker would like take me seriously. You know, like you
Yeah.
do little things to put yourself in that place now.
Sure.
you know, and then you grow into that place, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I've been listening to a lot of Gary Vee. You know, he talks about the economic collapse in the next one. I want to know your personal opinion about where we are as an economy right now, and what you think millennials can do to prepare for the economic collapse, especially specifically when it comes to skill sets. Like, what skills can we develop to prepare for that time, and how soon do you think it is? Just your opinion about all that.
Yeah, it's a good question. We do anticipate kind of a market correction. There's always cycles, though. I don't really think it's like doomsday situation. It's
Yeah.
just, you know, to overcome our last market correction, the government the feds pump a lot of cash into the economy to just make it a little bit easier to get a loan so people can get a home. And like, they have to do things to encourage spending. And now that the economy is growing, so that's called quantitative easing. So now that the economy is growing, they just pull some of that excess cash back. And when they do pull it back, since, you know, it becomes a little bit more difficult to get loans and stuff like that. So you'll see corporates like lay people off, as an example. You know, you'll see big layoffs. Right now, there's a record number of Americans that are 90 days delinquent on their auto loans. So you start seeing that. Student loans at an all-time high. There's a lot of indicators that would suggest that the market is indeed correcting. And I think what we do is, like, one, understand that that's not going to prevent life from changing. Like, there's a lot of fundamentally changing, like media landscapes, like, you know, AI. There's all this innovation that is never stopped by any market cycle. So like, we have to understand that even though the market corrects a little bit, there's still a direction of the future. And I want us all to be thinking about playing there. Because if you're trying to play catch up and you're catching up to a system that's broken anyway and changing, you're going to lose. But if you lean into what's coming up next, that's what I would be doing. Like, personally, like, I'm getting calls. Yesterday, I got a call from a senior level executive who was like, "Hey, John, my team and I, we want to understand media more. Can you come into the office on Friday?" Like, dude, they're calling a 26-year-old kid who doesn't really have a whole lot of experience. I'm sure they know a lot more than me in some areas, but all I'm saying is, like, that is really eye-opening. And I think anyone watching should really grasp the fact that if you jump into like a new field, it doesn't take that long to be the leader all of a sudden. You can be leading if you jump into a new space. And that, to me, is very exciting.
No, that's really good. I had a question from your community that came in. Shout out to Privy Kennedy. He wanted to know, how do you keep your spirit in line and energy clear when dealing with constant business pressures and the personalities involved? Like, how do you deal with mental health for yourself?
I don't right now. I mean, it's probably not the best answer, but I just understand that everything comes in ebbs and flows for me, right? Like, I will get to the point, like, for instance, Jay-Z. I'm the same age as Jay-Z when he dropped Reasonable Doubt, as an example.
Wow.
26, right? Like, he's just now that he dropped 444, at 44, he's just now getting to this stage of, like, working through, you know, some of his demons. I guess what I'm saying is, I'm young in my development right now, and my way to deal with it all is just to understand everything ebbs and flows. Like, everything ebbs and flows. And for me, as long as I'm rooted in something that's a little bit deeper than what's fleeting, I'm okay. Like, that's enough for me. So, and that for me is, like, sometimes when the pressure gets big, when the voices get loud, you know, there's a lot of noise, especially now being on air. I've now, like, it opens the floodgates to hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people that you've never been in contact with. Like, my Instagram community is different because, like, I've spent time nurturing a lot of these relationships, like Stephen Longsworth, who's on right now, Freddie Martinez, Strive Higher, you know, like, all these people I feel, like, connected to in some weird way because, like, I've been growing digitally. But you do get to a point of growth, like where I am now for the first time, where it just opens up the floodgates to more and more noise and more opinions and more things that people have to say. And, like, you know, if I'm not careful, I can find myself like lost in,
Yeah.
you know, lost in the waves. But to me, it's like an ocean, right? Like the water is most still,
Yeah.
you know, on the lower levels, and all that
Mm.
stuff is just noise and it goes away. So yeah, that's enough for me right this moment.
That's good. That's really good. There's a story that you shared on one of your videos too, and you talked about that Jewish family that you got connected with that got you into real estate. I want to know from you, like when you were with them for that time, whether they were mentoring you or you're just shadowing them and learning from them, what values did they instill in you that really resonated with you that made you like reassured you of the future self you want to be?
Integrity was a big one.
Hmm.
They had this famous, not famous, but they shared this story with me that I thought was really funny. So they're a big real estate developer family, and in the 80s or whenever it was, that I think it was the 80s, 85, Forbes introduced the richest, you know, people list.
Yeah.
And they got 2 calls that year. One was from this family saying like, "Hey, you put us on there for too much," and the other call was Trump saying, "Hey, you put me on for too little." And it
Whoa.
was just like so telling. Like they were like, you know, trying to keep it low pro.
Yeah.
And I think they, being with them, let me know that even though cutting corners, you get to where you can see faster in the short term, in the long term, it actually ends up creating a longer path. So they were really big about, you know, playing it straight. Also, just this idea of like, they just assume, I think in Jewish community, you kind of assume that you're going to pass what you're working on onto the next
Yeah.
person. And assuming that mindset changed my perception completely. Because when you automatically just assume that there's longevity in what you're doing
Yeah.
and it's not fleeting, it changes the way you go about building that thing. You know? And like I
Yeah.
came up in a family of like merchants and immigrants, and like everything for us is just like quick flipping. You know, my mom used to sell super soakers in the park in the summertime.
Wow.
You know, and or she would like cook food and like sell it out, you know, to the guys who used to hang out on the corner, like, you know. So merchant and immigrant communities are a lot more quick flip, quick flip, quick flip. These guys were like, yo, build, you know,
Over time.
build for the long term, brick by brick, not quick flip. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was a big one for me.
That's cool. So when it comes to personal brand and just that idea of wanting to build something for the long term, like could you just speak into tips you give to people that's the one asset they have. Maybe they, you know, they don't have land or whatever, but they're building their personal brand and they want to do it well over a long period of time. What do you say to them?
Yeah, there's not much to it. I mean, there is and there isn't, right? Like there's tons of nuances that we can go into right now that I've learned over time. But the simple thing is that like most people just get discouraged from even starting. And like they'll find some perfectly good excuse on paper for why they shouldn't start. Oh, well, I don't have the right mic. I don't have the right this. I don't have the right, like, you could go on and on and on.
Yeah.
You know, or you can start. And then when you start, for me, it's like finding out the best way to stay consistent has been my biggest, at first, my earliest challenge, and now my greatest strength. Like, you have to figure out, because it is very hard to stay consistent if every time you shoot content, you're like reinventing the wheel every time.
Yeah.
You know, like you got to figure out some new format, some new this, some new that. Like, it's going to be tough to stay consistent. And I've been through a lot of stop and starts. But when you find, which was what I call the hub, like when you find what's going to be the way that you can consistently make content happen, you're good. Like, for instance, you right now, you're doing, you do your Instagram lives, you do your interview series, like this hopefully will yield a lot more content from you. And that's like one of the ways that you stay consistent. You know, for me right now, I have several, because I have Viceland. Viceland helps me stay consistent because I could just post little assets from there. I have a show on VaynerMedia at 137. I could use that. I could use my vlog. My big one for me was my talks as well. But none of that came until I had one that I was very consistent with.
Right.
And, you know, then you can build from there. So to anyone like listening right now that wants to get into personal brand, output consistently, the end.
Yeah.
Everything else
That's
is a
good.
little detail that you don't need to get hung up on.
Yeah. So I know that your heart's desire is to build generational wealth for your community and people that look like us. But like, what do you feel like is the message you're trying to instill into this generation with your life, you know?
That you can. I think you can. Like, that would be my simple 2 words. Because I don't know, the thing is easy to like. So to take it back to the beginning, when you were reading my bio,
Yeah.
I was like, I know that the 18-year-old me when I first started would have loved to meet 26-year-old me.
Sure.
But I also don't know that if you would have told me all those like things, that I don't know, I would have been foolish enough to believe that I could, but I don't know if I would have really, really believed it. I would have been like,
Yeah.
you know, and media plays a very interesting role, because when you hear about someone, anyone, when you hear about them on repeat and their story is told over and over, it brings that person's story to life in a way that, like, you know, we're tempted to want to like compare ourselves to or emulate or what, I don't know, but it's like, even hearing my own makes me feel like, any person's story fully lived out is going to sound awesome, including yours. Right. And that's when I was like, oh, okay. I kind of weaned off of looking to see how Steve Jobs did it or anyone else did it. And I was like, I'm just going to, you know, gonna do the best I can with what I feel I've been blessed with.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
and then it's played out perfectly, because now people will say, wow, the story is great. But, you know, it wasn't up to me to be born into where I was born and then have the doorman job and the laundry thing. And like, it wasn't up to me. It just happened that way. And I think anything played out looks really awesome looking back. So, yeah.
That's really good. That's really cool. And I love what you said. It was a new concept when I was listening to your content, and you were saying, most people ask you, you know, who do you look up to? And you said, you know, I really don't look up to anyone. Who I'm looking up to is my future self.
Yeah.
And that's just like a shift in mindset, because typically you're like, oh, the Steve Jobs model, I can be like that, or the Gary Vee model, I can be like that. And you're always trying to change who you are to fit into someone else's story.
Exactly.
But when you said that, it resonated with me. It's like, stop trying to fit into someone else's story and work out your own story, you know?
Exactly. And like, just think about that. I love that you mentioned that. Just think about how the fact that that's a very common and normalized and accepted question. Like, yo, you know, it's normal now for you to try to find another path, as you said, to fit into. Just the inherent nature of that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with striving towards something. Like, I look at certain career paths and I feel inspired that you can take it to those heights. Yeah. But never at the expense of like, or rather, I'm careful for it not to come at the expense of, like, as you said, just growing in your path versus trying to fit into someone else's. Because I posted this the other day, but someone called me a bootleg Gary Vee, and I just laughed. And I was, you know, and I'm signed to Vayner Speakers, and I host a show at VaynerMedia, so there's plenty of touch points, and I can see it. And he's been an influence, but like, yeah, I'm always gonna be a broke anyone else. I'm a broke bootleg. You know, Erin Ashley. I'm a bootleg Grant Cardone. I'm a bootleg, you know, anyone but me. And I just laughed because, yeah, man, I just want to see how I could do it in my own way at the greatest height. Like, that's what I'm chasing. That's what I'm constantly going back and forth with. It's like, man, what is the greatest height to which I can express myself? You know, like, I want to do music. Like, there's so many things that I know I still want to do, and will only come with time.
Yeah, I love that. Well, John, thank you so much for being on this show. Like, this has been such, honestly, truthfully, a privilege. Like, when I got the email back saying that you would do it, I was like, wait, what? You know?
I saw that.
So it's just really, truthfully, a privilege. And final question, this is something I ask every person that I interview. This podcast is for millennials who want to make an impact in their community. So I just want to know from you, final words, if people want to make an impact in their community, what advice would you give them, especially to millennials?
Yeah, I would say don't try to take on the whole damn problem. Don't take on like don't try to take on every facet of the problem. Problems
Mhm.
normally are big and complex, and if you want to make an impact, you got to find which slice of the problem you feel passionate about tackling now.
Yeah.
Um, like, because there's so many ways to give back to your community. You can give back via healthcare or pet care or volunteering or activism or business or art. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, any passion you could use to build something meaningful. So just find what kind of sets you on fire, what captures your imagination. For me, that's such a good sign. Like
Yeah.
if it's relatively low effort for you to just like think about something all day and you're like, oh man, I love this.
Hmm.
That's what you should be leaning into, and that's how the community will benefit the most. Just think
Yeah.
if we had everyone like on fire about what they love to do, oh my
Sure.
gosh, the output would be insane. So that would be
Uh-huh.
my 2 cents.
That's great. Well, John, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Cheering you on, watching all your stuff, man.
Thank
And we
you.
just appreciate you.
Thank you. This
Talk
was
to you
fun.
soon.
Let's do it again.
Absolutely.